The morning sun caught the edge of fresh cement sealing my old well, on the Monday before Thanksgiving, no less. Name's Luther Hornsby, 76, retired mechanic, still keeps his AM radio and a dented thermos from '82. Smelled like wet dust and something wrong. Ever had your home turned against you? The Monday before Thanksgiving, Luther Hornsby's morning routine was shattered when he spotted a gray crust of cement sealing his old water well shut. The oatmeal sat untouched on his kitchen table, steam curling weakly into the cool air. From his radio on the counter, a gravelly voice crooned a Hank Williams tune, but Luther didn't hum along like he usually did. He was standing barefoot in the doorway, suspenders dangling over a flannel shirt, blinking at the sight in his front yard. The cement shimmered faintly under the desert morning sun, edges still wet. It hadn't been there yesterday. His porch rocking chair gave a tired squeak as he stepped off the stoop and shuffled across the cracked flagstones. The well had always been there, a squat metal cap with his initials welded on it. Now, a rectangular slab of pale gray covered the spot, like a gravestone. He bent down, knees creaking, and touched it. The surface was warm. Not more than a few hours old. His fingers came away chalky. A pale blue paper flapped against his front door. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. But he walked over anyway, peeled it from the tape with slow, stiff hands. "Dear resident," it began, in sharp sans serif type. "This property has been found in noncompliance with the Desert Vista HOA Community Aesthetic Standards. Unauthorized water structures are prohibited as of October 2023. Remediation completed November 20, 2023. No name. No signature. Just a barcode and a small HOA logo in the corner." He folded the paper once, then twice, and tucked it into his back pocket. Out beyond the gravel path, the hills were turning amber in the sun, and saguaros threw long shadows across the road. He walked back to the well, no, the cement slab, and sat beside it on the old metal patio chair he kept there. He had painted it sky blue with his son, Darren, one spring afternoon in 1986, after they finished digging the well. They'd used an auger drill Luther borrowed from a buddy at the garage, spent 3 weeks testing, bracing, lining it with concrete they mixed by hand. The city had frowned, but the land had been his, and the water was clean. The wind kicked up a tiny cloud of dust, and Luther shut his eyes. Footsteps approached, slow and careful. Then the soft voice of Cora Mills, her lilting Alabama drawl even more pronounced when she tried to whisper. "Morning, Luther." He didn't open his eyes. "Cora." She lowered herself onto the other patio chair, a foil-covered plate balanced on her lap. "Apple. Still warm." He nodded and accepted the slice. The pie crumbled gently under the plastic fork. She watched him eat a few bites before speaking again. "You get the notice?" He wiped his mouth with a square of paper towel from his pocket. "I got it." Cora pursed her lips. "Madeline's getting ruthless. Said she wants everything cleaned up before the holiday lights go up. Wants things to look right for the carol parade." "Didn't know a hole in the ground was offensive," Luther muttered. Cora hesitated. "She brought in that new contractor, Spalding, I think, real quiet fella. Folks been waking up to fresh paint jobs and trimmed hedges they didn't ask for." They sat in silence for a while, the AM radio crackling faintly from inside the house. "Your granddaughter still in Boston?" Cora asked. He nodded, eyes still on the slab. "Told her to stay there for the holiday. No need to fuss." But that afternoon, after Cora left with her pie plate and a pat on his arm, Luther stood in his kitchen again, rotary phone cradled to his ear. The cord was stretched and kinked near the wall, the way Ellis always teased him about. It rang twice before her voice answered, chipper but weary. "Hey, Grandpa. Everything okay?" He didn't respond at first. Just let the silence speak for him. "Grandpa." "They poured concrete over the well," he said. A pause. "Who did?" "HOA." He cleared his throat. "Some aesthetic regulation." He could hear her shift in her chair, the faint rustle of a sweatshirt sleeve. That's not even legal. I thought maybe you'd know someone who could help me look into it. You don't need a lawyer, she said softly. You need someone to stand on that porch with you. That evening, as the desert cooled and the sky bruised purple, Luther brought out a folding chair and set it beside the cement. The wind tugged at his flannel shirt. He sat down slowly, the joints in his back protesting. Not without a fight, he whispered. His phone buzzed. Ellis, I just booked my flight. I'll be there Tuesday. Ellis Hornsby steps off the plane in desert boots and resolve, the scent of mesquite smoke unfamiliar but oddly invigorating. The heat struck her first, not oppressive, but dry and insistent, slipping into the fabric of her blouse and curling around her neck like an old cat. Tucson looked flatter than she remembered, more space between things. The sky spread out like someone had tipped the corners of a sheet. She blinked against the late afternoon glare, her leather duffel thumping softly against her knee as she scanned the curb. Luther's pickup looked out of place next to the line of clean sedans. It hadn't changed since she last saw it 5 years ago, faded blue paint, a crumpled fender, and a small sticker in the corner of the windshield that read U.S. Army, Retired. He stepped out as she approached, the passenger door already open, and handed her a thermos without a word. She raised an eyebrow. Still hot. He gave a noncommittal grunt. Figured you'd want caffeine after a flight. The coffee was strong, bitter, and perfect. They didn't talk much on the drive. The landscape rolled past in rust and gold. Prickly pear patches and chain-link fences, mailbox clusters and the occasional tire swing. Ellis sipped and watched her grandfather's hands on the wheel, knuckles broad, fingers stiff. The desert diner sat at the edge of Route 210, its neon sign flickering gently. Inside, it smelled like fry oil and cinnamon. The booths were upholstered in turquoise vinyl, the kind that stuck to bare skin, and the tabletops had tiny silver jukeboxes at each end. Framed posters of rodeo champions from the 70s stared down from the walls. Luther ordered meatloaf. Ellis got mashed potatoes and iced tea, but barely touched either. Her eyes flicked to the people around them, 2 older women sharing pie, a man in a tan vest chatting with the cook at the counter, a waitress refilling mugs with a tired smile. The regulars. They all looked up when Luther walked in, and they all gave her that quiet once-over people give to someone who doesn't belong. You didn't tell me it was this bad, she said, voice low. Luther scooped mashed potatoes like he was digging gravel. Didn't think there was much to say. She unfolded the crumpled citation he'd handed her earlier, eyes narrowing at the phrasing. Violation of aesthetic uniformity, what does that even mean? Means they don't like what don't match. A man 2 booths over leaned closer. You talking about Madeline again, Luther? He grunted. Who else? The man chuckled. Lady's got the whole HOA on a leash. Can't put up Christmas lights without her blessing. Ellis turned to Luther. When's the next meeting? He wiped gravy from his chin. Tonight. 7. At the clubhouse. She raised an eyebrow. Convenient. No time like the present, he muttered. The community center was squat and beige, with low ceilings and dim lights. Rows of plastic chairs lined up facing a podium adorned with a fake succulent arrangement. About 24 residents sat scattered across the seats, murmuring. Ellis walked in behind Luther, spine straight, lips tight. Madeline Hornsby stood near the front, adjusting papers. Her hair was iron gray and perfect, her blouse cream and wrinkle-free. When she saw Ellis, her expression didn't shift. She stepped forward with a smile too crisp to be warm. You must be Ellis. Visiting from the east, are you? Ellis offered a neutral nod. Boston. Madeline's eyes dropped briefly to Ellis's boots. Ah. A lawyer? Legal assistant, Ellis replied, her voice calm. But I read quickly. Madeline turned to the crowd. Let's begin, shall we? The meeting moved like molasses. Talk of shrub height, driveway materials, a brief tangent about dog barking hours. Ellis flipped through the HOA charter Luther had given her in the car. Her fingers found notes in the margins, mostly from Cora Mills, judging by the loopy script. Underlines in blue ink marked phrases like emergency powers and community compliance discretion. Finally, someone brought up the sealed well. A woman with dyed blonde hair raised her hand timidly. I thought Luther's well was grandfathered in. Madeline smiled. The new standards supersede all outdated clauses. The board voted last quarter. Ellis stood. May I ask when the board informed residents about the new standards? Madeline's eyes narrowed just slightly. HOA bulletins are sent monthly. It's not our fault if people choose not to read them. Was there a vote among homeowners? Outsiders, Madeline said sharply, can't change what the board already passed. Ellis didn't flinch. She sat back down, slowly, fingers still resting on the charter. The meeting adjourned with soft applause. Outside, the air had cooled, and crickets sang near the oleanders. Back at Luther's, she sat at the kitchen table under the yellow glow of a single bulb, the charter open in front of her. Her suitcase leaned against the hallway wall, still zipped. The house smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and lemon oil. Ellis flipped the charter's final page and murmured, "Wanna bet?" The library smelled of dust and pine cleaner. Ellis felt at home. There was a familiar hush to the Tucson County Public Library, the kind that settled into your bones and made thoughts sharpen. Afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, casting golden streaks across the tiled floor and the rows of high wooden shelves. The faint hum of microfilm machines echoed like distant bees, giving rhythm to the otherwise still air. Ellis had set up camp at a long wooden table near the back. Her travel mug, black, with bold white letters reading "Wicked Smart," sat beside her notepad, the steam long since faded but the caffeine still pulling her focus forward. On her left, a stack of HOA meeting minutes dating back to 2016. On her right, a growing pile of yellow sticky notes where she scribbled keywords: repair credits, board approval, landscaping, invoice number 2239. She flipped another binder open, carefully thumbing past attendance rosters and neighborhood flyers. Somewhere amid all this bureaucratic debris, something wasn't adding up. You've got the look of someone in deep, a voice said softly. Ellis looked up. A woman in her 60s stood a few feet away, cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled into a low bun, and her reading glasses hung from a beaded chain. The cardigan had small embroidered birds stitched along the hem, robins and chickadees perched as if waiting their turn to speak. I'm Diane, the woman said. Librarian emeritus. Well, semi-retired. I shelve what I like now. Ellis offered a polite smile. Ellis Hornsby. Researching HOA policies. Fun stuff. Diane chuckled. Nobody reads HOA minutes unless they're angry or stubborn. Sometimes both. Ellis paused. Both sounds about right. Diane's eyes crinkled. I knew a Hornsby once. Luther? My grandfather. Well. Diane glanced around, then pulled a slim file folder from beneath her own stack of returned books. You didn't get this from me. Ellis blinked. Diane slid the file across the table and walked away without another word. Inside were 3 stapled documents, all labeled Maintenance Authorization, Internal. The signatures were uniform, but the services varied: sprinkler repair, fence repainting, gravel refreshing. They all shared one oddity: no contractor names, no receipts, just approved, board discretion. And each was charged to the same address, 2412 Yucca Ridge. A quick scan of Ellis's sticky notes confirmed the name. Glenn. One of the quieter board members. Never mentioned in the recent meetings. But he was clearly present behind the scenes. Ellis's curiosity surged. She began cross-referencing the dates with HOA newsletters, property assessments, even a few contractor ads clipped and saved by Diane. An old invoice tucked between pages mentioned Silver Hills Landscaping, supposedly the group hired for Glenn's repairs. But when she checked the registry on her laptop, the business hadn't filed taxes or logged activity in 5 years. She leaned back, fingers steepled under her chin. Luther's porch fan came to mind, how he'd climbed up just yesterday with a wrench and determination, refusing to let a shaky motor keep him from his evening breeze. This was the opposite of that, lazy, concealed, and funded with community dues. Diane returned later with a book cart and whispered, "They fined me once for a wind chime. Said it disturbed the visual harmony of the courtyard. I took it down, but I never forgot." Ellis nodded. "Looks like they've been moving HOA funds into Glenn's property under maintenance improvements." Diane smiled thinly. "Some dirt never stays buried." By evening, Ellis sat on the porch beside Luther, sipping the last of her reheated diner coffee. The old fan whirred above them, still shaky but functioning. Luther tapped his wrench on his knee, watching the last orange stripe of daylight slip behind the hills. "They've been funneling money for years," Ellis said, almost to herself. Luther raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. His silence was agreement. Later that night, Ellis returned to the kitchen table with the folder Diane had given her and the charter from last night. In a small envelope tucked behind a stack of budget reports, she found something odd, a scanned check. It was dated July 2021. Signed by Madeline Hornsby. Payable to Silver Hills Landscaping, an address that led, via a quick Google search, to a storage unit on the edge of town. She sat back, stunned. The signature was real. But the company? A ghost. The quiet creak of the floor behind her sent a chill through the warm kitchen. A voice behind her said, "Careful where you dig, sweetheart." Ellis set the pie on the counter and said, "We eat, then we bring the heat." The kitchen filled with the scent of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and a whisper of wood polish rising from the freshly wiped table. Sunlight spilled across the floor in long golden strips, and Luther stood at the counter, peeling sweet potatoes with a military-issue knife that looked more fit for survival than cooking. The blade had dulled with time, but his grip hadn't. He didn't say much. Neither did she. They moved around each other quietly. She stirred mac and cheese while he sliced the last of the ham. The only sound came from the soft hum of the radio in the background, an old AM station playing Glenn Campbell's Wichita Lineman. Ellis wore a faded maple leaf sweater she'd dug out of her suitcase that morning. It was a bit too warm for Arizona, but something about the threadbare sleeves gave her resolve. On the table, beside the pie, sat a manila folder. Inside, 5 annotated pages of questionable HOA expenditures, 2 misdated meeting records, and a freshly typed letter titled Notice of Intent to Sue. They ate just after 2. No guests, no second helpings. Luther chewed slowly, eyes somewhere in the middle distance, as if still watching cement dry over his well. Ellis didn't press him. There was a rhythm to silence between people who trusted each other. It didn't need to be filled. After dishes were rinsed and stacked, Ellis changed into dark slacks and flats. She placed the documents into a neat binder and slipped it into her tote. The pie remained untouched. The HOA clubhouse smelled of plastic chairs and lemon disinfectant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a bluish tint that made the room feel colder than it was. A folding table with styrofoam cups and lukewarm cider sat near the entrance, ignored. About 15 residents dotted the space, seated with the air of people waiting for bad news or trying to avoid it. Madeline stood near the front again, pristine as ever, her blazer the color of old wine. Her son Clayton sat at the far end of the row, arms crossed, gaze neutral. Ellis walked in beside Luther. The room quieted. Madeline didn't wait. "Miss Hornsby, this is a community meeting. We don't typically open the floor to outside commentary." Ellis stepped forward without pause. "As of this morning, I am acting on behalf of Mr. Hornsby and several other residents who have signed a joint petition for financial review." She placed the binder on the podium with deliberate calm. "This contains documented discrepancies in board-approved maintenance orders, duplicate payments to defunct vendors, and unfiled amendments to the community charter." Madeline's smile tightened. "Those documents were not requested through official channels." "True," Ellis said. "Because your board failed to provide a legally mandated public audit when asked in writing, twice." A rustle moved through the room. A few neighbors leaned in. One woman whispered something behind her hand. Clayton's eyes flicked toward his mother. Ellis lifted the top page. Under Arizona Revised Statute Section 33-1805, homeowners have the right to inspect all financial and other records of the association within 10 business days of a written request. This was not honored. Madeline stepped forward, voice clipped. "You are not a licensed attorney." Ellis didn't flinch. "I don't need to be to serve notice." She tapped the binder. "This is a notice of intent to sue. If no response or action is taken within 15 calendar days, we will file in small claims court. And we'll win." The air thickened. Luther sat with his arms crossed, unreadable. Diane stood in the back, silent but watchful. "I'm asking you to leave," Madeline said, cheeks flushed. "No," came a voice. It was the man from the diner, tan vest, same steady eyes. "Let her finish." Madeline turned. "Excuse me?" Another voice, softer. "Let her speak." A woman this time. Ellis looked out over them. "You've all felt it, haven't you? The fines that come without warning, the citations for things you've done for decades. A wind chime. A birdhouse. A non-neutral paint swatch." She stepped away from the podium. "You deserve transparency. You deserve to know where your dues go." Madeline turned to Clayton. "End the meeting." He didn't move. Just stared ahead. Ellis nodded slightly. "We'll see you in court." The meeting ended in murmurs and side glances. Some residents left quickly, others lingered, standing in loose clusters. Diane approached, cardigan sleeves still pushed to her elbows. She didn't speak at first. Just handed over a small envelope, her fingers brushing Ellis's. "It was slipped under my windshield," she said, voice low. Ellis opened it carefully. Inside, a blurry scan of an internal HOA memo, typed and signed. The last line stood out, bold and clean in courier font. "Burn the second copy." Sometimes, the first crack isn't the loudest, but it's the one that spreads. The folding chairs creaked as elderly residents filed slowly into the dusty hall of the old neighborhood church. Warm lamplight bathed the wooden rafters, casting long, soft shadows on the polished floor. Ellis stood near a makeshift podium, a reused music stand, with her leather-bound notebook balanced on top. Behind her, Diane quietly arranged plates of cornbread and mugs of steaming peppermint tea. The room smelled of old hymnals and something sweet and hopeful. Luther sat in the second row beside Cora Mills, arms folded tight but nodding occasionally. His eyes flicked over each arriving neighbor, weighing their mood like a seasoned mechanic listening for engine misfires. Ellis cleared her throat gently. "Thank you all for coming. I know this wasn't on the official HOA calendar." A low chuckle rippled across the room. From the back, Mr. Leo shifted in his chair. "Damn right it wasn't," he muttered, loud enough to draw laughter. Ellis let the room settle before continuing. "We're here tonight because too many of us have been silenced. Because flower pots, wind chimes, and paint colors shouldn't be threats. Because a well shouldn't be buried under cement without warning." June, a silver-haired widow in a lavender sweater, raised her hand slowly. "They fined me last year for planting milkweed. Said it attracted bees." "They fined me for having curtains too sheer," another woman added. "Privacy violations," they said. Ellis took careful notes, each comment pushing the ink harder onto the paper. Diane moved beside her, placing a manila envelope discreetly on the edge of the stand. Ellis opened it and blinked at the pages, scanned HOA internal emails. At the top, private HOA briefings. In the third row, Clayton stood silently, holding a flash drive. He stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "These files show internal discussions about enforcement quotas. They were looking to pad budgets through fines." He connected his tablet to a projector, and an image flickered onto the wall, a district water regulation map, color-coded with usage zones. One red square stood out, a lone marker around Luther's property. Ellis leaned closer. This isn't standard. It's not, Clayton confirmed. I found it attached to a compliance email from 3 years ago. But the HOA doesn't control water rights. That's county territory. Murmurs swept through the pews like wind through dry grass. Diane tapped Ellis's arm. Check the 2020 appendix. Budget allocations. Back home that night, Ellis sat at Diane's kitchen table, flipping through the digitized files. The walls were filled with photos, Diane and her siblings at an old county fair, her parents on their wedding day, a cat curled in front of a fireplace. It was the kind of house that made memories feel like old friends. Ellis's eyes stopped on a page buried deep in the appendix. Here, she whispered. The 2020 HOA financials made no mention of the well, but a note in the margin, likely left from an internal draft, read, "Grandfathered exclusion, non-enforceable." She stood abruptly, nearly knocking her tea off the table. They had no jurisdiction. The HOA had paved over something they never legally controlled. By morning, she was at the Pima County Recorder's office. The clerk confirmed what Ellis suspected: the well was listed under a protected, grandfathered exception. Luther's father had registered it in 1972, before the HOA even existed. Ellis drove back gripping the wheel with white knuckles, heart pounding not with anger but clarity. The foundation of the HOA's claim had cracked. That evening, back at the church, the group reconvened. The tension had shifted, less fear, more resolve. Clayton brought more files, including a timeline of internal decision-making. Leo had fallen asleep halfway through the first testimony, mouth slightly open beneath his veteran's cap. Nobody disturbed him. Ellis finished speaking and looked to the crowd. They've been bluffing us. For years. A quiet pause followed, then Cora stood. It's time we take this to the county board. No one heard the backhoe coming this time, but everyone saw it leave. Monday morning arrived with a muted sun behind gauzy clouds, casting a gray hush over the Tucson suburb. Luther's flannel was buttoned to the top, a thermos in hand as he watched Ellis back out of the driveway in her rental car. The faint scent of creosote clung to the chilled breeze, promising change. Inside the county attorney's office, Ellis slid a manila envelope across the counter. Notice of petition, she said evenly, and a formal request to freeze HOA accounts pending investigation. Her words landed with a soft weight, but the receptionist looked up, startled. It wasn't every day someone challenged a homeowners association like it was a cartel. By noon, a temporary injunction had been granted. Luther could resume drawing water from his land, no interference, no fines. Ellis printed the document twice, tucking one into her leather folder and handing the other to her grandfather. You've got water rights again, at least for now. Luther didn't smile. He nodded, slow and certain, like a man winding a watch before war. At 2 p.m., the HOA clubhouse filled under the humming fluorescence and the smell of lemon disinfectant. Folding chairs scraped on the linoleum as residents filed in, more than usual. Even Leo had swapped his walker for a cane, determined to stand tall. June offered sugar cookies from a tin. Diane entered quietly, her sweater covered in holly leaves. Madeline took the podium with her signature clack of heels. She wore crimson today, shoulder pads sharp, lipstick sharper. We are here to address false rumors and misunderstandings. There will be no disruption to board functions. Ellis stood from the second row. This isn't rumor. It's a county-filed injunction and pending audit. She lifted the stamped document, letting the golden seal catch the light. Gasps murmured through the crowd. Clayton's eyes flicked from his mother to Ellis, then down to his folder. When Madeline dismissed Ellis as a guest with no standing, he didn't correct her. But as she continued, railing against disloyalty and outside influence, Clayton quietly closed his folder and stepped down from the dais. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His absence echoed louder than protest. Luther remained seated, arms folded. It wasn't his voice people needed to hear now, it was their own. And they were finding it. Then, near the back, Diane rose and cleared her throat. Some of us, she said gently, have signed a letter in support of Ellis Hornsby's efforts. We believe oversight is long overdue. She passed it forward, 15 names strong. Not anonymous. Not afraid. Before Madeline could respond, the door opened with a gust of cold air. A deputy sheriff stepped inside, boots heavy on the floor, eyes scanning the room. Per order of the county attorney, he announced, the HOA board's discretionary financial operations are hereby suspended pending further review. He handed the envelope to Madeline, who stared at it as if it had insulted her personally. You're all turning on me, she snapped, her voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. After everything I built? But no one answered. The room had grown still, not with fear, but with something that looked suspiciously like hope. The folding chair creaked louder than usual, as if it sensed this was its last HOA meeting under Madeline. The old community hall brimmed with people. Jackets hung on chair backs, and the floor groaned under the shuffle of boots and orthopedic soles. A low hum of whispers floated beneath the rattle of the old heater mounted in the ceiling corner. Someone had brought in a crockpot of cider. It steamed next to a plastic tray of store-bought cookies. Ellis sat beside Luther, her fingers wrapped around a warm paper cup. Across the room, Madeline adjusted her silver brooch-like armor. Her lips were taut. The chair beneath her seemed to groan in protest when she shifted. We'll begin, she said, rapping the gavel twice. But before she could continue, Ellis rose. Madam Chair, the community requests time for open comment. Madeline narrowed her eyes. As per our internal policy, guests, especially non-homeowners, do not possess floor privileges. Ellis held up a document. That policy violates Article 3, Section 4 of the Charter. And I'm here on proxy authorization filed last Monday. Murmurs spread through the room. Cora gave a faint nod of approval from the back row. Madeline's lips twitched. Fine. 3 minutes. She never got to start the timer. Clayton stood. He hadn't taken a seat, instead leaning against the side wall like he had all week. Without a word, he walked to the front, unfolded a paper from his folder, and read. Dated October 15, 2021. To the residents of Palo Mesa HOA, I hereby resign from my position as president, effective immediately. The room sucked in breath. Madeline's face turned to stone. Clayton continued, voice even. This letter was written by my mother. She never submitted it, though I watched her type it. Things weren't better then, but they've only gotten worse. Madeline shot up. That is private. You had no right. Neither did you, Ellis said softly, when you diverted over $18,000 in unauthorized landscaping reimbursements. Heads turned. Ellis walked forward, placing a folder on the podium like a final puzzle piece. Cross-referenced budgets. Phantom vendor receipts. Unauthorized signatures. Leo adjusted his glasses and stood. Madam Chair, I move for a vote of no confidence. June stood beside him. Seconded. Within minutes, slips of paper, torn pages from the back of HOA newsletters, were passed around. Names scribbled. Tally counted. 27-4, Diane said calmly, raising the clipboard. The motion carries. Madeline stood still for a long time. Then she reached down, grabbed the HOA's binder, and hurled it to the floor. Pages scattered across her sensible heels. No one stopped her when she walked out. Not even Clayton. Silence lingered. Then Clayton stepped forward. Effective immediately, he said clearly, I move to dissolve this board and hold open elections. Applause didn't explode. It built, steady and sincere. The sound of control falling, and community standing. Near the door, a man in a veteran's cap pulled out a harmonica and played a wobbly but spirited version of This Land Is Your Land. Some laughed, others wiped tears. They turned to Ellis. She stepped forward, glanced at the crowd, and simply said, We just started. Sunlight glinted off the last shard of cement as it cracked, fell, and revealed the old pipe beneath. The morning air was gentle, carrying a warmth that hadn't visited this patch of Tucson in weeks. A crow called in the distance as Luther, gloves on, swung his hammer one last time. A soft hiss echoed from the cracked seal, as if the well itself exhaled. Ellis sat on the front steps with crossed legs, flipping through the notes from the newly restructured HOA board. Her thumb lingered over a line labeled Article Dissolution Approved, 27 votes in favor, 4 opposed. She allowed herself a quiet smile. "Need a hand?" Clayton asked, approaching with 2 utility techs in tow. They carried tool belts and a rust-red valve replacement marked Tucson County Waterworks. Luther looked up. "We've waited long enough." The men crouched near the exposed pipe. One of them wiped dust from a pressure gauge and nodded. "We're ready to restore access. It'll take 5 minutes." Behind them, Diane walked up holding a dented metal basin planted with wildflowers. "Symbolic," she said, setting it beside the well, "but real. Just like this mess we climbed out of." Cora followed, carrying a thermos of hot coffee. "Only thing sweeter than justice," she quipped, handing Ellis a cup. The valve twisted open with a groan, followed by the gurgle of returning flow. Water sputtered, then surged, clear and clean, into a shallow collection bucket. Luther bent down, cupped his hands beneath the stream, and raised the water to his lips. His voice was steady but low. "You kept your promise, kid." Ellis looked up at him. "You kept the fight alive." By noon, the front yard had transformed. Folding tables lined the driveway, covered in apple pies, cornbread, and grilled sausages. Children tossed a red rubber ball near the mailbox. Jazz from Cora's vintage radio swirled with laughter. Leo showed off an old harmonica and played a wandering tune. June handed out mason jars filled with sun tea. Diane perched on the porch rail, recounting how the HOA once fined her for hanging laundry on a Tuesday. No one interrupted. Ellis stood beside her car, a manila folder in hand. Inside was a complete record, charters, signatures, whistleblower notes. She tapped it once before handing it to Clayton. "If they ever try this again," she said, "you know what to do." He nodded, clutching the file like an oath. Luther, now rocking in his favorite porch chair, placed one hand on the pipe casing as if grounding himself. His suspenders sagged a little, but he looked taller somehow. The kids' shouts drifted around him, and he closed his eyes for a moment, letting it all in. Ellis opened the car door. Luther didn't turn his head when he said, "Call me if they try to pave over your mailbox." Ellis laughed. "Deal." She climbed in, started the engine, and pulled away slowly. In the rearview mirror, the old man's outline stayed small but steady, like the well, no longer buried. The morning they cleared the well, something deeper reopened too, a sense of belonging, long buried but never lost. In a town where rules once silenced neighbors, a few voices rose, and then many followed. When power is misused, it cracks the very foundation it stands on, but when community rises together, even the deepest injustice can be washed clean. Like water finding its path through stone, justice has a way of returning, quiet, steady, and just in time.